Yo, what's up, everybody? Got Mountaineers' finest Blaine Stewart on here. Pumped to see where this conversation goes. As always, though, before we get rocking and rolling, wild or funny story. What you got for everybody?
So yeah, put me on the spot a little bit, but one thing, there was a funny story, and I guess it was a lesson just because we finished a player workout. As a young coach last year, like I tried to make everything be perfect.
Yeah.
You know how it is, like first impressions and all that fun stuff. So first time, I think it was the second spring practice last year. Um, we have a really good tight end who is an exceptional player, and it was his first spring at West Virginia, and we were running this two tight end set, and he was going in for it to be the first play of the drill. So I was like, okay, do you want to be in this spot or this spot? Because I think you're going to catch the ball if you go to this position. And he's
Yeah.
like, well, like, I don't know, like the other position may like pop open. I'm like, man, the play is designed for you to get the ball. Like, just go ahead and try here, and we'll see what happens. Well, what happens? The quarterback rolls out, and the guy where he wanted to go and he thought the ball may go. I put someone else there, and they had a 50-yard touchdown on the first play of the day in his first week at West Virginia. And I was like, damn it. Like I had to
So,
explain. He was a great teammate about it, went and celebrate with his guy. But all he did was came off field and said, yeah, I thought that may be open. So
yeah.
like, that was a very good lesson as a young coach to, one, trust your players, and two, you can never predict exactly, what will happen. And I always thought, like, let it sort itself out. And it was just funny that was kind of an icebreaker for our relationship of like, all right, I got to trust you when the time comes.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, I guess it's like a really good segue is like one of the questions I'm always curious of, like reasons for getting into coaching,
Mhm.
right? Like I think, you know, a little bit of like backstory is like so like I had owned a sports performance gym for like 12, 13 years. And so a lot of football players came through there and like, they all say it's like they want to get into coaching. And I'm like, do you, or is it just like the next easy route you feel like in your brain because like football or whatever sport is like super familiar to them? And so I'm curious, like, was it something you always knew, or is it like something you just started to like uncover and discover about yourself of like, hey, damn, like I'm actually pretty good at this. It's like I can make a career out of it. What was kind of like the evolution for you?
That's a great question. So I was very fortunate to be raised in a coaching family. My dad was a college football coach for 33 years. So my earliest memories are, going to practice and things of that
Yeah.
like that. So I was always around the game, and I wanted to play as long as I could. Knew very early I wasn't going to be an NFL player, but wanted to play in college and just see where it took me. So as I, went through the process of being a high school player and getting recruited, like at the end of my idea, like coaching probably was going to be what I wanted to do.
Right.
But kind of the first thing that was like, okay, my goal in life is to be a football coach. Was when I was a freshman at JMU. I was redshirting, so I wasn't playing, but I added value by being a signaler to the offense.
Hmm.
So with what that entailed though was being on the headset for game day communication. And I just remember we were playing the University of Maryland, and we got spanked that day. Stephon Diggs. I knew about Stephon Diggs when he was at Maryland, not the NFL player he is now because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what he did to JMU. But I just remember being on the headset and hearing the intricacies of coaching, game planning, player interaction. I was in a great role of like helping my teammates with the offense, being a signaler and all that. So that was kind of the okay, like I want to be a football coach. But
Right.
looking back, I always tell people so many people poured into me as a young athlete that really bettered me well beyond football, life, school, teachers, whatever. But the coaching impact that I was blessed with and that people poured into me, that's what I try to do. And that's my why. That's why I'm in college football. That's why, I'm going into year two here. Like the evolution of the players that I've had has been so rewarding. And that's my why. I was poured into as a young person, and I want to be that type of, coach and hopefully mentor that is the reason I'm in this thing, because it's really just a player's game, and I'm trying to pour every resource into these guys, no matter what position on the team, to try to make them successful. That's kind
Yeah.
of my.
Yeah. I think too is I guess talk about in today's day and age, everybody wants to like blame the kids, right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, like they wouldn't have made it in my day. It's like if they were back then. And so, I think, how have you in your coaching career kind of seen like the evolution of like the person, right? The young
Mhm.
adult kind of evolved, and like what's that in terms of like impact and mentorship? Like how have you kind of had to like adjust like messaging or personality or things of those natures to be able to get through? Because ultimately, like you said, like you're in the relationship business, right? Like that's really what it boils down to. And so how has that kind of evolution evolved for you in your coaching career?
I would say just like as a whole, society has kind of changed in terms of, you know, young people, from my perspective, like to know the why of what
Yeah.
they're doing. So, back in the day, and I kind of caught the tail end of this. Like I finished playing in 2016, but my freshman year, I remember, if coach says, run 100 yards, touch line, and run back, you just kind of did it. And
Right.
now, like, not that it's malicious in any way, but the guys are going to be like, well, why would I do that? So it
Right.
challenges you as a coach to have the explanation of, well, this is what we're trying to get done in this specific drill. So I think, young people in general are more educated than they've ever been. And,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing. It's good to be curious. It's good to be inquisitive. I've got the Ted Lasso mug right there, which, is the whole be curious thing. So I'm not, I'm not ever shied away from when people ask why, but I better have a darn good answer of if I'm asking them to do something hard, here's the reason behind it, the method to the madness, I guess you could call it. So I just think like as you evolve with these young athletes, like they're not changing. So you
Right.
better meet them where they are. And guys are as talented as they've ever been. They're smart in their training, their X's and O's, whatever as they've ever been, is in their branding. Like guys are making real money in their brand. So, you better find a way to meet them halfway and help them achieve their goals with rational explanation, as opposed to the old school, like let's just do this roll drill back and forth and not necessarily have to defend the why, as opposed
Right.
to the old school mentality that, some people, me included, I'm sure yourself in the wrestling world, I don't even want to know what you had to do back in the day. But the kind of the
I got
why.
some Chris Allen horror stories.
And I can only imagine that was a beautiful time for West Virginia strength coaches back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, fun. Like when I came to visit out there and so like my dad maybe be in some black slacks and a button-up shirt, like coming on my visit out here, and they took me over to meet Chris and staff. And he literally put me through like a 7-minute workout, and I thought
In
I
the
was gonna
yeah, that sounds
die.
about right. That sounds like some 2005, 2006 visits right there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Going back to the curiosity thing is like I'm huge proponent of that. And I think that like how is that part of like your messaging for them to not only encourage asking why, but to me it's like if you're not getting the results, you want like better questions drive better results. I think that's
Hmm.
kind of like a Tony Robbins thing a little bit. And so the analogy I always say is like if I'm asking you a question, you're like, I don't understand. If I just keep repeating the same question, you're just gonna look at me like I'm an idiot, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so in some way I have to figure out how to language those things. And so how do you encourage them to be curious, and what does that curiosity look like? I guess even for you, right? Like how do you stay curious in evolving from a personal development standpoint, from a coaching development standpoint, and then also like allowing that to like trickle down like into the players as well.
No, that's great. And the first thing that pops in my mind is kind of our offensive messaging. We have kind of the blueprint of how can we be special, if that makes
Right.
sense. So, we talk about having great connection,
Mm.
which before you can do anything, you got to be connected and invested
Hmm.
with people. So if you have great connection, there can be great communication. And with
Mm.
great communication, we say can create great clarity. So
Mm.
if you have connection, you communicate, well, that's clear for the players. And then when it's clear for them, it breeds confidence to
Yeah.
where they can go out there and try, certain wrestling moves or certain techniques on the football field that without having laid the groundwork of, investing in them, being clear and concise in your messaging so they know what they're doing, therefore they can be confident. And I think, one thing that especially the older guys, young guys just want to do it right, but
Right.
when older guys are kind of excuse me, in the program for a little bit, they can understand the ins and outs of the offense to therefore ask the questions that you're talking about that can lead to, hey, coach, like when this defensive end is playing this way, would I be able to use this technique? A
Right.
freshman may not
Yeah,
even
yeah,
ask
yeah.
that question, but an older guy that's seen it and you've laid the foundation of, these are the non-negotiables, these are how we're going to execute, and then you have a toolbox that, like we talked about earlier, it's a player's game. You got to go do it. So I think just building the connection and the clarity is so big. And then also in terms of my own, personal curiosity is I'm a football lover. Like I love
Yeah.
my timeline is full of just random clips. Like I always see North Dakota State stuff. I always see unique, like small high schools doing really cool stuff. So I just try to, take a wide net approach and find, okay, well, hey, maybe this is a different way to do things. So I'm always trying to develop, and that's big on our staff. Like we do what we call professional development. And we just had a retreat and we all got 15 minutes to talk about something that could help our team. So
Yeah.
I think that comes from the top down, and I'm very fortunate to work for a guy that encourages curiosity and
Yeah.
encourages personal growth. So I'm always looking for the newest, whether it's technique or scheme or whatever. And I just think like the moment you think you know it all is when you start to doom yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the old cliche of like, this is the way that we've always done it,
Yeah,
right? Like
and
that,
it's
that'll
back to the why. Like, well, maybe there's a different way to do it. So I agree. Like, just always being curious and trying to revamp how you operate is always a good way to reset in any given like cycle.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, and it makes me think back too, is I saw a clip from Lane Kiffin talking about Coach Saban at their media day or whatever, and he was just
Mhm.
like one of the things that stood out to him was he didn't use the word curiosity. He was talking about him adapting, but at some
Mhm.
point you have to be curious about adapting. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like, hey, times are changing. Okay, well, how do we need to operate differently so
Mhm.
that we can keep up? And I think that again, I think that's a primary driver of like probably, I'm assuming why like he would be able to have so much success of
Oh, for
like
sure.
constantly of just like, can we do things differently? And I'm sure a lot of times he probably came across no. It's like, hey, our way's just fine, but at least you
Mhm.
asked the question and got
Yeah.
like a concrete
Yeah.
answer.
Correct. You may not always get a okay, we're going to change, but at least the discussion could lead to thoughtfulness moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. What was your 15-minute presentation on?
My 15-minute presentation was on this certain scheme in the red zone that kind of marries off of each other. It's we line up in the same formation every time and putting guys in really the same spot, but we can do numerous different things. So
Yeah.
I built a package of a formation that tried to show, all right, well, here's a run we already have, here's a play we already have, we can add this, and it can isolate the skills and assets of numerous different guys. So
Yeah.
I was talking about red zone football, which was
Uh,
fun.
well, like I think that thinking back and relating this to, I'm sure a lot of coaches, I'm assuming a lot of coaches are like this, but I think this is where athletes, fall into the trap of they confuse watching things on YouTube as a fan being a
Mhm.
student of the game. It's like, don't
Sure.
confuse the two. It's like, don't watch all the highlights just to be like, oh, that was super cool
Yeah.
versus like actually sitting down and being a student of the game and like,
Mhm.
okay, like actually like breaking it down. Like, okay,
Mhm.
why did they do that? And why does this happen here?
Yeah.
And so it's like encouraging that versus like I watched 2 hours of YouTube. It's like, but what did you get
Yeah.
from it?
What tangibly did you get done? Yeah. We talk about that all the time. Like we have kind of our defensive line coach brought it this offseason, brought it up in a meeting of like kind of a cheat sheet on how to
Hmm.
watch film. Because you can load up a game and just hit play and there's numerous different things happening. So, he has a framework that we've kind of adapted for all positions of like, all right, this is what we're looking for in as opposed to watching a 60 play game, let's watch a 15 play cut up thoughtfully of like, hey, you're watching one specific thing every play. And
Yeah.
that's a skill, just like anything else. It's to be practiced and, it grows over time.
Yeah. 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 Like frameworks matter, right? I think
Mhm.
that's kind of a little bit of a lost art too, is I think nowadays, because there's so much information
Mhm.
relevant and the way marketing is and everything, it's like we get caught up in shiny object syndrome like big time. And so it's like instead of sticking to something and just watching it play out
Mhm.
versus like you're a month in and you're like, oh, but like, oh, we can do that too. And then you're like, oh, next thing you got like 15 different things. And it's just like, what
Correct.
are we doing here?
That's exactly what Sean McVay I just saw on Twitter. Sean McVay was in an interview talking about like same thing. As much information is out there, there's more information in football out there. There's all these numerous things where it's like, hey, if I want to run what we call outside zone, an outside run play, you can pull in the click of a button every outside zone that a certain team runs. So like with all that information, all that great stuff, who are you going to be at the end of the day? Like
Yeah.
how are you spending your time? What's your bread and butter that like you're going to hang your hat on? Obviously, you need counters and things off of that, but who are you going to be? And I think that's hard to really invest in an identity because, as a young coach, I'm more guilty than probably anybody on staff of like, hey, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. Well, a new play takes about ballpark, I'd say 20 reps to get the different looks, to get the different reactions of the defense, to get guys in different spots, different things for the quarterback. So like, all right, it's Sunday. I see a play that's going to probably work next Saturday against any given opponent. Do we have the time and ability
Right.
to throw in a new play? Well, probably not in season. So that's why, it's thoughtful of who you're going to be and in anything, like what's your niche?
Yeah.
And your fit.
And I think like learning to like pull the right levers. And I think that we get caught up as coaches of just like pulling a bunch of levers versus like the analogy, I was talking with a coach recently and I was like what do you feel like is your biggest gap from getting point A to point B? And it was like it was coaching. It was the actual like articulating things to
Sure.
athletes and the
Yeah.
technical side of things. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so like in the middle of the season is if you're spending a ton of time recruiting, I'm not saying recruiting doesn't matter, but that's a lever that may not need to be pulled,
Yeah.
right?
To
Like you
pull at
may
a
need,
different strength. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like
Exactly
if
right.
you leave and go 5 days on a recruiting trip, and so you're losing 5 days from the technical side of things of like being with your athletes, it's like you got to figure out, right? Like
Mhm.
it is which one's gonna, I call it like the big domino, right? Like if you knock that one over, is gonna knock, trickle down like
Yeah.
10
Sure. Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
and figuring out which one's gonna knock the 10 to 15 additional dominoes, because
Yeah.
that one may knock two or three, but it's like I heard somebody in business say the other day, it was like what's made like Buffett and all these guys so successful is their ability to say no, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and that's a hard thing, especially with just in any industry right now, how many different directions you're getting pulled in. Like time is obviously the most valuable asset. Like I can't believe how fast this summer went by. And looking back, I'm trying to be thoughtful of like, did I maximize it?
right,
Because
right.
for coaches, for football coaches everywhere, summer's over. Like we start practice a week from today. So
Yeah.
um, looking back, self-analyzing, being thoughtful, like, did I maximize the dominoes, like you said? Because there is a lot of moving pieces. Whether you like it or not, you got to be adaptable.
Yeah. And I think even like compounded with time is your attention, right?
Hmm.
Like you only have so much attention to give. And so it's like, same person analogy is, you know, you can start 10 businesses, but like, what if you just had one and gave
Yeah,
your attention to that one business? How big
right.
could that get versus now you
Sure.
got to like you got 10 CEOs and 10 managers you got to operate and 100 employees versus 10 employees. And it's
Yeah.
like your attention goes wider versus
Mhm.
deeper. And yeah, it just becomes more distracting. And I think of it like inputs to outputs, right?
Yeah.
Like now, like your outputs don't have as much value because your
Mhm.
inputs are just smaller based off of like your attention.
Yeah, I would agree. I would totally agree with that. It's something, especially college football coaches, we got to juggle based on how much is changing and recruiting and this, that, and the other. We could talk all day on just how football has changed in the last whatever, but our time has not. So be
Right.
thoughtful with that.
Yeah. 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 What do you feel like is I kind of asked the question in terms of like the evolution of the athlete. So like identity is my jam, right? Like
Mhm.
that's something I could, I have always said it's like you don't get what you want, you get who you are. And so if you're
Mhm.
not getting what you want, like we have to take a step back and look at ourselves. It's like, okay, who do I need to become? What
Sure.
person do I need to be? And so what do you feel like, and within identity, I just feel like we're emotional creatures, whatever you want to call us.
Mhm.
Um, what's the big emotional hurdle for you guys, like as coaches, like in from a football standpoint? Like,
It's a great question. I think, a hurdle would be that everybody on our roster wants to help us.
Hmm.
but everyone's on a very different trajectory. And when I spent my time with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Coach Tomlin, he always had this saying to guys that were either on the practice squad or in kind of minimized roles with any sport, like you never know when your number is going to be called. So he would always say, I'm not asking you to be patient, but I'm going to ask you to work. So
Mm.
like you may not have to be happy where you are, but I'm going to ask you to put your head down and work because you never know when it's going to come. So I think, managing the emotions and expectations of certain guys is a human element that in any sport phase, whatever, is hard because everyone wants to be their best self. And, you know, I don't shy away from this. Like we're selfish creatures at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like you said, like we want to do this. And like I always think I'm watching the Receiver show on Netflix.
Yeah.
They're talking about how much goes into one certain play to even get an opportunity to do what they do to get paid and catch the ball, make plays, score touchdowns, whatever. So, I think a thing that gets lost a little bit is like if I just handle the man in this chair, that's all I can control. So
Hmm.
it's hard, when you put expectations on yourself and put goals that there may be a hurdle getting to. So I think just managing expectations is a real job of my responsibility for my guys and the whole team. And it stems from the top. Like Coach Brown's got to manage everybody's. The offensive
Right.
coordinator has to manage the offenses. I got to manage my tight ends. I got to manage my student assistant. I got to manage all these things. And then, how do we get over hurdles? How do we, reward guys who are doing right, but just their number hasn't been called yet? Or how do we
Yeah.
help guys face adversity? So I think a big thing in today's world, and it's been that way forever, but like I said, it's more managing expectations and emotions of a guy's personal journey while all pushing for the collective. Like everyone's still got the all for one for all mentality, but you know, you want to be a part of that. So there's definitely management of the people while trying to push for the common good that can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too is, I mean, obviously I guess we can call it social media in the sense of people, like if you're not on the field, you're more noticed now, right? Like you walk
Mhm.
around, it's like, when you playing, bro?
Yeah.
And so I think that internally, male, female, whoever, football, softball, gymnastics, it doesn't really matter, is I think that eats at a lot of people. And
Mhm.
so it's like, the fear of being judged. And
Sure.
so it's like, when they're in practice, they obsess over the sense of like, I gotta have it, I gotta have it, I gotta have
Yeah.
it, so that they don't get all the like, dude, what do you like? One play? Like I thought
Yeah.
you were a starter. Like, what's the
Correct.
deal?
And I think it's a blessing, but also there can be negatives to any blessing. Like Morgantown, like football, basketball, well, sports in general are very important at Western University. So, one thing I try to do is think of, the people behind each individual player, right? Like you got a high school coach, you got people back home that's like, hey man, like, you're playing college football, but why aren't you playing? So
Yeah,
those people, not that they mean to be malicious, but
right.
can be in someone's ear of like, hey man, like, you know, the grass could be greener or whatever. You got to deal with those
Hmm.
expectations of not just a player, but their entire circle of who's whispering in their ear. So it's a never ending thing.
Yeah.
It's almost harder in college now because of the accessibility to um the transfer portal and things of that nature. Like if you're in the NFL, you sign a contract, you're playing for whoever. College, it's managing those expectations and managing their families and managing all those things to build a cohesive unit, which, like you said, can be challenging.
Yeah, and I think even like tying Portal to like curiosity too is, I don't have any like scientific data on this, but I think that because like in the back of your mind, that like you almost have an out. And so it's like I don't have to, on the front side of things, is like I don't have to take as much time to actually think about if this is the right fit for me.
Yeah,
And so it's
sure.
like, we just pull the trigger quickly because we know at the end of the day, it's like we'll give it 6 months. And if it ain't it, then like we'll head
Yeah.
out of here.
Mhm.
Versus, back before the portal was such a thing, it was like, I just feel like there was more like due diligence from like an individual
Yeah.
standpoint of like, okay, like the question was like, hey, this is gonna affect the next 4 to 5 years of my
Mhm.
life. And now it's like, that question doesn't really get asked anymore.
Yeah, I would agree. And like you said, it's just the change that is like there's nothing we can do about it. So
Right.
we got to find, and numerous schools got to find like how can their identity thrive in this environment.
Right.
Like it takes a special type of person just going to college or special type of athlete to play at West Virginia. Like it's a unique environment. So how do we mitigate some issues on the front end of finding guys that fit us and
Yeah.
that are who we want to be? Like you talked about that underdog role back in the back in when you were in Morgantown. So, it's just it's it is what it is. And we got to do a good job as a coach, as an individual coach, collective, and as a program of putting guys in a place where they see the investment as
Hmm.
opposed to, always, unfortunately, some people looking for different paths.
Financial paths.
Whatever path that may be.
Okay, so going back to, because I think that like showing the investment goes back to, I almost think of it like a flow chart you were talking about earlier. And at the top, the starting point was the idea of like being connected. And so how do you go about, like, for you personally, making sure, I'm sure it starts in the recruiting process, but even
Mhm.
so much so when you see them basically daily, is how do you go about ensuring that that connection is like it's genuinely felt? Because I feel like, again, athletes are smarter. I feel like their bullshit radar is like 10 times greater. It's
True.
like
Yes. They
so
they can they can smell it from a mile away.
how do you go about showing kind of, I guess, the authentic side of you to
Mhm.
where they do feel that connection, which ultimately like builds that trust
Yeah.
into for you?
For sure. No, that I think that's a very necessary thing that you have to reflect on, like the type of coach you want to be. I would say first is you have to be consistent. You got to be the
Yeah.
same guy every day. Like when you walk in that unit meeting or walk in, your position meeting, you got to be the same guy every day so they know who they're going to get. And then I just think in terms of, making sure that we're all on the same page is never bending to the non-negotiables, like making
Yeah.
sure they know like certain mistakes are going to happen, but like these are the mistakes that we obviously can't have happen. So just being the same guy every day and investing, like you said, from the early process of, this is what it's going to be and sticking to that. Like you said, the BS radars is as high as it's ever been. So you got to be able to be the same guy and really just show them that after you build that connection with them, like you're going to go to bat for them. Like
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, I got to say in front of the group, I'm wrong. Or if something happens on the field, like I got to protect my guys to the best of my ability. So I think once they know how bought in you are and like how consistent you are, that then they're like, okay, like this guy, we may not always see eye to eye, but he's got my best interest at heart, genuinely.
Yeah. For you is, it's funny. So you use like non-negotiables, and like my own kind of like mentor and coach is like the thing that he's like hammering home with me and us, a group of us, is the idea of like principles. And he's
Mhm.
like, so many times we get caught up in, like, we have our objective. He goes, the next step is principles and then strategy. And he goes, for most of us, we make the mistake is we have the objective and then we go to strategy, right? Like
Mhm.
how
Yeah.
how are we going to do this, right?
Mhm.
Versus skipping over the non-negotiables, the principles that ultimately, achieve the outcome. And so for you, like, in achieving said objective, whatever it is, whether that be for your specific position or just the collective team overall, like what are those like non-negotiable like principles like for you?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, it stems top down from how we operate as an entire team. But just speaking personally, like I always talk about the guys handling things that require no talent. What might those
Mm,
be? Showing up on time, being prepared, bringing great energy. If we can have the non-negotiables of if we check these boxes, we'll at least have a good day. Those are
right.
some things I'm big on, and finding a way to lead by example, things like
Hmm.
that. Well, when we talk about our room, like going into fall camp, I'm getting ready to do my presentation for a week from today for our meeting. It's just who do we want to be, like you said, the objective, and how are we going to get there? And then it's going to be a pretty open-ended question, and then we're going to hammer out 3 to 5 things of, hopefully things like that, be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, bring great energy, um, handle the things that require no talent, do a little extra, and then just everything else after that is always going to be net positive. So
Right.
handle the things that ensure, you at least have the start to a great day.
Yeah. 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 Because I, it's so many people's, whether you're talking about like the physical side of things, i.e., like how to
Mhm.
win, like how to score more points, like whatever the objective is, or the mindset, the non-physical side, right? Is they're like, I feel like I need more confidence. And like the next question is like, okay, how do I get more confidence? I'm like, whoa, like back up. Like,
Mhm.
what is the definition of confidence? Like,
Yeah,
what does
for
that look
sure.
like for you? Because I need to get a very clear picture. We can't even talk about how or strategy until we have this very clear picture of like what it is that you actually want. And I
Correct.
think that that's where, again, I think that there's the biggest leaders, the best leaders, the coaches, whoever that have sustainable success is they're able to paint that cathedral
Mhm.
really clearly over and over and over again
Yeah.
versus the others it's like they're okay at it, right?
Mhm.
Like and I think that that's comes back to the basics win, right? Like it
Yeah.
is in technical like fun like actual football like the fundamentals are going to win at the ultimate.
Mhm.
It's like can you pass, can you block, can you tackle? It's like let's not make it more complicated than it
Correct.
is. It's like now we get into the strategy of like okay, whatever. But yeah, I think being able to articulate that is um a powerful like I guess just like a superpower like as a person to have
Mhm.
because a lot of people can't. They just they're very like they're not good at painting the picture. They just
Yeah.
like, hey, what do you want to do today? I want to get better. They're vague. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. It's like they
Vague.
don't really know.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's real. And my job is to remove as much gray as possible.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, if we're calling a certain play or we're running a certain route, like this is point A to point B, and then after B, you use your talents to do the rest. But
Right.
there's A to B that has to get there.
Yeah. What was the big if any, I guess, big difference in like professional to college, like being around like the guys specifically?
That's a really good question, and it's still football, and it's still, like you talked about, like the fundamentals, the things that are going to help you be successful. Time is a huge one.
Mm,
Time is a huge one. Like these guys still sign 4-year undergraduate scholarships, so you're going to have a freshman unless something changes, whatever, for 4 years. So the time invested um, is a beautiful thing in college football. Like you can
yeah.
really pour into a guy. Unfortunately, at the professional level that I was around, like you go to training camp with 90, you leave training camp with 53.
Yeah.
Like there's great dudes and that I still keep up with on social media and stuff, but like there's guys I haven't seen in 6 years that I was with every day for 4 or 5 months, them trying to make the team. And then on cut day, like it's over. So I think
Yeah.
that's just a major difference of like it almost, can let a college guy not feel the sense of urgency that sometimes every
Mm,
coach wants to have because they're like, well, like, I'm just a freshman. Like, I'll get it. But when I was in the NFL, if a undrafted rookie or a guy on his second or third team came in, he was like, I am all in. So it was, almost a completely different process for those guys.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if a guy is having a slow start to a block of the calendar, like a bad spring ball. Well, if you have a bad spring ball in the NFL, you're getting cut.
Right.
If you're having a bad spring ball as a sophomore, like, all right, well, let's talk about the why. How do we get better in the summer and then be ready for the fall? That's a beautiful thing of college is like you still have the time to pour into these guys in the NFL. It is a business and it is treated as such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes me think, even, especially the guys trying to prove themselves at the professional level, it's like, unfortunate things happen. And it's like, and it doesn't even have to be a serious injury, right? Like it can just be like, you pull a hammy and it's like, okay, well, you can't practice. So it's like, all right, next, like,
You
sorry,
can't
dude, you're
practice for
gone.
3 weeks. You're not a big contract guy. All right, we got one flying in before we even cut you. And that is
Yeah.
harsh reality for guys to grasp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, oh, man, that's
It's
crazy.
dog eat dog.
what about like what would be the difference like in things that maybe like you took away from like leadership and coaching standpoint, right? Because there's I'm assuming a big assumption here, but I'm assuming that like somebody like Coach Tomlin, the way that he articulates to guys, grown men, right? Like making lots of money is slightly different than young adults, right? And so
Right.
it's like, what are some of the two, like, what are some of the things that like you pull from both sides?
Yeah, for sure. I think I was very fortunate as a young coach to be surrounded with the best of the best. Like, I saw Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, the end of Big Ben's career when he could still play. Like I mean, even though Ben retired, he still had more arm talent than anybody I've ever seen.
Right,
So,
right.
like, he still had it. I was around Antonio Brown, and Antonio
Yeah.
Brown, like, unfortunately, kind of has had a
Little
unique past
zigzag.
post football, but it is what it is. When I was around AB, he was on top of the world. He led the league in catches, or in touchdowns, excuse me, the 1 year I was with AB. Like, that dude was unbelievable on the football field. So one thing I learned though, and it's helped with these modern college athletes is, if you can't help an NFL football player, they will cut you off and they will lose respect for
Mhm.
you instantly. So even though I was a young coach who was thrown in some, unique situations of coaching guys that were older than me, more experienced than me, whatever, Coach Tomlin was very invested in young coaches' development. He'd say, when we were doing COVID, Coach T had great COVID season. Coach T had great foresight that in training camp, we need to practice when the receiver coach or tight end coach, whoever, may get COVID. So, I'm 20, what was I? I was 25, maybe turning 26. He said, "Hey, receiver coach, you have COVID today." He didn't, but he was like, "You're in protocol. Blaine has to coach the wideouts all day. He's running meetings. He's substituting during practice. He's doing post-practice film." Like, I knew I had to be right and tight.
Oh,
So
damn.
it was a great opportunity. Now I was nervous as hell. And,
Yeah.
when something didn't go good, they're looking over at the receiver coach and he was like, "I ain't allowed to talk today." So that just helped me as a young guy. But with these young athletes, the professionals, I learned about the BS meter
Yeah.
probably well before I even knew what it was.
Yeah.
If you told an NFL guy something, like if I gave him a bad coaching point and he's an undrafted guy and he does something really poorly, I could be messing with his future. So I
Yeah.
had to be right, tight, locked in on the whys and the intricacies. So I try to take that same approach with my guys. I want to be as detailed and as precise in my language because, like you said, they can smell BS from a mile away, and it's kind of trickled down. Like, these guys are professionals now. They've got
Right.
NIL deals, they've got marketing deals, they've got long-term perspective and picture. So, it's whether people liked it or not, college football has changed, college athletics has changed. And, I was very fortunate to be coached by Coach Tomlin and company to, be ready for that,
Yeah.
which was a great opportunity.
How do you feel going back to like all the I guess opportunities is the best way to put it of like that college athletes have now to really set themselves up like
Mhm.
immediately. And
Yeah.
so I guess my question is again another Tony Robbins quote, but he always says he's like, we don't lack resources, we lack being resourceful. And
Mhm.
so how in your experience are resourceful in utilizing the different people and things, opportunities that they have, or
Yeah.
is it like a too cool for school, mentality?
Yeah, we definitely try to talk about that, throughout the course of our season and off-season development. Um, Coach T, I'm a, you're quoting your guy, I'm quoting Mike T.
Yeah, yeah,
Mike T always says, "Check your ego at the door."
yeah,
Like, open up, be vulnerable in your, ability to be coached. You know, like you said, there is no too cool for school. Like, you got to break those barriers down so a guy can't allow you to pour into him. Like, we talk about our circle of influence for our players. Like, major athletics, man, has so many resources. We have this
hmm
graphic. It's a player in the middle, and it's all these resources. Like, we've got strength and conditioning, we've got sports science recovery, we've got nutritionists, we've got team doctors, physical therapists, we've got mental health, we've got Fellowship of Christian Athletes. We've got all these. We got life after football. We have a guy in the building. His whole job, we call it the fifth quarter. is to set guys up for life after football. And if you're too cool and too guarded going through, your career, you will miss out on so many opportunities.
Yeah.
We've got 10 guys going to Pittsburgh right now. That's why we had the morning workout. 10 guys going to Pittsburgh right now on a leadership networking event. So those
Yeah.
guys had to apply to this group and do a little bit extra, but it's going to pay dividends for them. So I just think showing guys that accepting help and I don't have all the answers.
Right.
This is a Coach Brown quote. He said, I'm not an expert in strength and conditioning, but I hired a guy who is an expert. I'm not an expert in nutrition, but we've got 2 full-time dietitians on our staff and an executive chef. So, I think showing guys that whenever their time frame, clicks for them to accept these resources, that it's cool to ask for help. And it's cool to, I'm not a car guy, but I'm taking my car to a shop, so why would be anything else other than in any other phase of your life? So I think showing those guys that it's great to set yourself up, like you said, like, man, the blessings our guys have to get a free education, come out of school with a little bit of money in their pocket, no debt. And even if football, ends the day after their last college game, they have so many opportunities from the things that are available in this program to be unbelievably set up for life after football.
Yeah. And I think too I think utilizing those resources to build like the network
Mm-hmm.
too is, I think I was talking with a few, so I've had a few like player engagement guys from the
Sure.
NFL on,
Yeah.
and one of the things they talked about is it's easier for them when a guy leaves the team. Let's say he gets cut and his NFL career is over. Like the ones that utilized me, the ones that I built a connection with, it's easier to like continue to kind of like help them out, like
Sure.
whatever
I
that
would,
looks
I would
like,
totally agree with that. I would totally
versus
agree.
the one that was too cool for school kind
Yeah.
of, and then like all of a sudden 2 years later it's like they're kind of at rock bottom, and it's like the only person they know is this this guy that they never utilized in the
Right.
time that they were there. And it's like they going back to like time and attention, it's like, dude, I feel for you, but I got 70 other people like I have to tend to. It's like I
A
really
whole
don't
a whole new class of rookies or whatever. Yeah. But in my opinion,
nonstop.
that goes back to the connection. Like if you don't have genuine connection on the front end, like, you know, you may not love it, but if someone doesn't build that connection, then comes calling, it's like there's no the substance there to go out on a limb for a guy,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's where it's funny. I was speaking at an event like 2 weeks ago, and a couple of like the athletes there, they were almost like they were almost frustrated because I was like, if you reached out to 100 people just cold, I was like, you might get 2 or 3 to respond back. And I was like, that's actually pretty solid. And they were like, that is so mean, why would they not? And I was like, would you, if a third grader hit you up and asked you a question about your sport, would you respond back? And they're like, probably not. I'm like, it's kind of the equivalent, right? Like,
Unfortunately, it is.
you don't feel like you have the time or the attention to be able to like respond back, especially if there was 100 of them. You might pick 2 and just like simply like go about your merry way. But I think that making sure that you're building those connections, because
Mhm.
then you never know, like you never know who you like that puts you around, and then
Right.
that allows you to like ask them a question which could ultimately like move the needle forward.
For
So
sure. I think it's a great thought process.
what future pace for you? Like what's the where is it, like is it head coaching one day? Like what's kind of your dream outcome, if you
Sure.
will, so to speak?
Uh, you know, I'm very happy with where I am, obviously back home and surrounded by, an unbelievable group of guys, both coaches and players. But, my long-term goal is to be a play caller at some
Yeah.
point. I'm an offensive coach, so my goal, whatever that time frame is to be a play caller. And then hopefully, someday I'd love to be an NFL head coach if I had to say like
Nice.
long term. So my goal
Yeah.
is to, probably the next box is find an opportunity to either grow with a new position or find a way to be a coordinator somewhere. And then, hopefully down the line, have the opportunity to lead an organization because I'm fascinated by it. Whatever sport, whatever elite thing someone's doing. Like I remember on Amazon, they had those all or nothing shows and they did like the Man City. And I'm not a huge club soccer fan, but I love like international soccer. But
Yeah.
I loved watching how they operated. So like, I want to try to lead a group and do it at the highest level and take things from every phase, whatever that is, to hopefully, give the best product we can.
Yeah. Why, just curious, why the professional level?
I don't know. I would love to be a college head coach as well, and maybe that happens first. But with being around professional football and the elite of the elite
Yeah.
talent that is, it's a very fair playing field.
Yeah.
Every NFL team has the same salary cap. Every college team does not have the same salary cap. So, even when whoever was struggling during my time in Pittsburgh, like we could be whatever 7-2 playing a 1-8 football team, and they got pros too. They got first round draft.
Yeah.
They got
Yeah.
great coaches too. It is just I always loved like the chess match and fair fight that it was, and it's cool. Trying to hopefully compete for that Super Bowl trophy someday, playing in February.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of, I had a conversation on here the other day with somebody. They're at Alabama now and came from, I forget the school they came from, but like a Power Five, like Division I school. And it was like the position that she's in now. Prior to that, it was in like donors or community relations. And I was like, yeah, it's a little bit different asking money there now.
Yeah, those checks don't always hit the same.
Few more zeros on the back end there in
No doubt. A lot more
Tuscaloosa,
yeses when asked for things.
huh? Oh man, I love it. Cool. All right, last question. So if you were in a stadium with 100,000 people, you
Mhm.
could only leave them with one message. What would your message be?
Oh man, that is huge. Um, if I could leave them with one message, you know, um, I don't know why my college coach popped in my mind, and his big thing was do it right.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I try to live by that. It may not, you may get away with taking shortcuts and things of that nature or whatever, but I think and it goes back to the old adage of, I guess this is two things to leave them with: how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
But I think if you do it right, whatever that is, like your personal life, your social life, professional life, like just however you want to live, if you do it right, you got a damn good chance to be happy with the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that was from
Yeah.
my college coach, Ever Withers. He always said, man, do it right.
Yeah. And it makes sense too. It's like, again, going back to like identity, when that becomes part of who you are, then people around you know that they're going to get like the things that you're going to do for them. They know it's going to be right or
Yes,
just
sir.
to the best of your ability, right? It's
Correct.
like
And
whatever.
you did it by the proper way. You didn't
Yeah.
take any shortcuts.
Yeah. 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 Well, cool, man. I love it, dude. I appreciate you coming on here. Like I always tell everybody is just, like I said before, is about you. And I feel like stories are what move people. And, I'm just trying to get as many stories and perspectives and philosophies and just like the evolution. I think everybody kind of has their own path. And so it like just encourages people to just kind of get going, right? Like get out there and like just pull the trigger, so to speak. Because, I mean, I don't know who said it, but that's kind of killed more dreams than anything else. I think people just fear of like not taking the action. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you,
for
man.
sure. No, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it, man. This was great.
Awesome, dude. Well, until next time, everybody. Peace.